This week on Dance of Joy, we talk about old-timey accents, broken rental agreements, and the timeless hilarity of a good wind-up. All that and more as we watch Season 7, Episode 7 of our favorite 80s hit sitcom, Perfect Strangers. Hello and welcome to Dance of Joy, a Perfect Strangers rewatch podcast. My name is Sophia. I'm one of your hosts, and joining me as always is your other host, who is also my brother. What's up, Imran?
Hello, how's it going?
Going very well, thank you. How are you?
Oh, I'm good. You know, do you ever sit around sometimes? You know, my beard is all black and white, my hair is black and white, and sometimes I sit around.
Your face looks like a barcode.
My face looks like a barcode, and sometimes I just want to live in an old-timey black and white world.
Oh.
Back in the day where there's piano music and people are all talking and moving fast and saying weird things, and then you get to wear fun hats.
Or where you hear the sound, wah, wah, wah,
yeah, that's what that, because then you know you did something wrong or embarrassing. How else will you know? Life just seems simpler.
Well,
in old-timey land.
We might be able to grant you a little bit of old-timey land
out
today,
of the city.
Because today we're talking about Perfect Strangers, Season 7, Episode 7. That's a lot of sevens. Entitled The Gazebo, or as I like to say, The Gazebo.
Isn't that how you say that word? Gazebo?
Gazebo.
Listen, I got my first nitpick right here. If this word was pronounced gazebo, wouldn't it be spelled with two E's instead of one E?
Well, if you could, the way it's spelled, you could also say gazebo.
Gazebo. I saw that. I prefer to use
Gazebo.
The authentic,
Gazebo.
the actual
Gazebo.
The original transatlantic, mid-Atlantic pronunciation is Gazebo. So we're going to go with that.
You know, I've always said Gazebo, and I feel like it's because we heard it somewhere as kids mispronounced that way, and it stuck with us, or like purposefully mispronounced that way.
It was probably on The Simpsons. Yes, maybe.
Why? If anyone knows why we have Gazebo in our heads.
No, but if anyone knows why the word G-A-Z-E-B-O is B-O is pronounced
it's
gazebo.
It's probably borrowed from like German or
gazebo.
Something.
You want it to be gazebo?
It's missing an accent.
Just add the
mark
E.
Over
you add
E.
the E, and it's a gazebo. Anyways.
Or an I, gazebo.
What is the gazebo all about? Well, if you open the TV guide, back in the day, you would have read the cousins try to build a gazebo, cutting up in black and white spoofs reminiscent of Laurel and Hardy routines. Oh, it's going to be a little tribute.
A spoof.
Spoof or tribute or homage. Spoof is good.
Gazebo spoof.
Gazebo.
Okay, who do we have in our episode? We have Bronson Pinchot and Marklyn Baker playing Balky and Larry, and also their old-timey counterparts. And we have a little bit of the girls, Rebecca Arthur and Melanie Wilson playing Marianne and Jennifer.
Just kind of pointing out obvious things to keep the episode
like
moving.
No reason to have them, which is so funny because we had like 3 episodes in a row where there were so many reasons to have them and they were nowhere.
They were nowhere around.
And now when there's no reason to have them, there they are.
Yeah.
This episode aired on November 1st, 1991.
And you can watch all episodes of Perfect Strangers right now in 2024 on Amazon Prime Video for a small fee, or purchase the DVDs. That way you'll have them forever. Because sometimes even when you buy stuff on these things, they can always just be like, no, you don't own this anymore. And it's gone. And you're like, wait, thought I bought it. And they're like, you're a sucker.
This is why capitalism is terrible.
That's right. None of this is working. Anyways.
Also, you'd have to have a DVD player to play those.
Yeah, but everybody's got those these days. Like PlayStations, Xboxes, they all you can play. You don't have one.
I have an external drive for my.
You would have to. They're cheap. You'd have to buy. Yeah. Yeah, there aren't any even drives in computers or anything.
Yeah.
It's gone that far.
Act 1 of The Gazebo. We start, remember we're still in this new big mansion-y house and we're in the kitchen again.
It's haunted. I remember that.
It's haunted and only like one time a year.
One day a year, but it's confirmed haunted.
We start in this beautiful kitchen and Marianne is sipping coffee from a mug and looking out a window toward the backyard, which is going to be a new site for us. And then Jennifer comes in and right away, first line, we get kind of the premise of this episode, but
This time Jennifer comes in with the plot.
Yeah, Jennifer comes in. Oh, thank goodness someone tells us what we're talking about, what we're watching today. And she says, have Balky and Larry started building the gazebo? Only she calls it gazebo.
It's improper pronunciation.
She mispronounces it as gazebo.
And Marianne goes, yes, but it's early in the process. No one's been hurt yet.
Okay,
so they don't have a lot of faith
again, just telling us that the fellas are not good at things.
Yeah.
And they're like, why do they even do this on their own? Like, I don't know. And then we cut to outside and we see Larry and Balky standing in this backyard thing. And there's like a walkway path through the backyard.
There's a base of a gazebo built in some of the sides, and there's wood planks everywhere. And there's like a big square thing.
And interestingly, one of our listeners pointed out, it was like jarring or remarkable or noticeable to her that so they're both in like just plain sweatshirts, but but Balky's in a blue sweatshirt and Larry's in a red sweatshirt, plain. And typically to date, we've always seen Larry in like the blue and green,
the cool colors. Yeah,
and Balky had like all the different colors.
You know what?
The reds.
I didn't even notice that until you pointed it out. But yeah, usually Larry is wearing the blues and the greens.
Yeah.
I don't know what that means. Larry's the hot color and
maybe they're
the cool color.
Changing it up, trying to retain viewership.
And so they're building a gazebo, and Larry's like, Balky, by this time tomorrow, we'll be sitting in our new gazebo sipping lemonade. And they look at each other, and then he points to the board on the side and just goes, can you figure out where this goes?
You know what this line reminded me of? That pipe in the plumbing episode where
where does this go?
They look around,
they look back,
and he goes,
look at trash.
That's totally what this line reminded me of.
Yes, that was classic prime Perfect Strangers.
Let's just talk about that episode again.
Yeah, we should just, at the end, we'll go back over pipe dreams because it was fantastic.
And so he asked, and Balky's like, you've asked that about every single piece of wood since we started. Balky goes, why didn't we just hire professionals to put this together the way that the guy at the hardware store recommended? And Larry's like, do you know why he said that? And Balky says, because he figured we didn't have a prayer of assembling it ourselves after he saw you knock over the paint can pyramid.
Paint can pyramid.
That's like a lot of words for like an okay joke.
Larry must have made a mess at the hardware store, and Larry just doesn't want to get ripped off.
He's want to get ripped off.
We can do this. We don't need help. Let's get to work. And now we get the start of lots of physical comedy.
Yes.
As Balky grabs that long board that's sitting there, puts it on his shoulder, and he's about to turn. Of course, he's going to turn and hit Larry, except at that moment, Larry bends down and picks up a mallet from the toolbox as the board swings just over his head without him knowing. And you're like, oh, great, he's safe. But then Balky turns back with the board.
Of course he does.
Smacks Larry in the face. He's holding a mallet up to his face. So that was, he got the sound. He was able to get the sound from the mallet. And then Balky puts the board down, and Larry's checking his nose as he does whenever he gets hit in the face.
And then they tussle a little bit. Larry tries to hit Balky's fingers. Balky's like hiding behind this board. Larry's trying to hit him with this mallet.
But Balky throws the board at him, and he throws it back. And the whole time the girls are watching this.
Yeah,
through a window.
Kitchen window.
And a very weird shot.
It's a strange.
With some harsh shadows.
And Jennifer says, don't they remind you of someone? And Marianne's like, yeah, Laverne and Shirley.
That's kind of funny.
That is kind of funny. And Jennifer, of course, is not talking about Laverne and Shirley. And who is she talking about? Well, we find out because she just tells us the second premise of this whole episode. Yeah. Laurel and Hardy. And then Marianne just looks at her and goes, all right.
So if you weren't sure what you were about to see, Jennifer has made it very clear. By name dropping Laurel and Hardy. That Laverne and Shirley line, a lot of these guys worked on Laverne and Shirley. A lot of producers and writers.
Creators.
So Judy Pioli was on the show as Terry Buttafuoco. Not Leather Tuscadero, although I liked her too. So they just name dropped Laurel and Hardy. And they cut back. And then here's where there's some weird transitions. And we're going to see this.
So they cut back to the guys and they're still like bickering and fighting. Blair's like, give me the board, give me the board.
I'm not going to hit you. Just give me the board.
And Belk is like, oh, blah, blah, blah. Anyway. And then as they're kind of like tussling, the scene,
there's a wavy
dissolve. I think it's called an oil dissolve or like a wavy melty thing.
Which transitions them into gentlemen wearing overalls and bowler hats and white gloves.
Yeah, and some prosthetic like chins and noses.
Well, here's the thing, and it's still in color at this point, and then this is
weird.
It's
in like a muted
It's kind of a muted color, and they're wearing makeup, but it is in color. And then when they cut to the close-up two-shot,
it turns into
black and white.
Very clumsily turns into black and white.
And we see this like 3 more times, and I just think they couldn't do the two.
You think they didn't have the technology?
I don't think they had the technology.
Like a time deadline and a mistake in editing, and they just let it, or like bad editing.
I think if they had the means, they would.
It's so clunky.
You would have to do a cross dissolve of 2 shots, and then also remove the color, cut to black and white.
Or maybe there were other things filmed that had to get cut, and there was some other transition to black and white, but it had to get cut for time, and so it became chunky.
Or maybe it's because they're filming in a studio audience, and that's where the cut has come, because they'd have to stop and reset and start again as Laurel and Hardy.
What does that have to do with color, though?
I don't know. It's weird, but it goes to color, and then when they come out, it's the same thing. It'll be like black and white, and it'll cut to color. But before the it's very strange. It's like they couldn't do a transition and black and white at the same time. And now, oh my God, we see the cousins.
So they look like basically as Laurel and Hardy, with Balky being Stan Laurel, the skinny one.
The skinny British one.
And Larry being Oliver Hardy, the rounder, shorter one.
American
one. And Larry's obviously not that round, so he's got fake round
and
around
you
him.
Hear the classic Laurel and Hardy music. That's
the
like
dance of the cuckoos. Yeah.
So for anyone who doesn't know, of course, Laurel and Hardy, the original like buddy slapstick comedic icons.
Yeah.
Most active of the years 1927 through 55.
Yeah.
And the Piano Movers, I believe, also was a spoof on a Laurel and Hardy short which we watched before. So this is going to be fun.
Yeah, we can reasonably expect it to be really fun, because this is the second time they've spoofed
they also did the Honeymooners. Yeah.
Predecessor like buddy comedy thing. They did the Honeymooners. That one had roles for the women as well.
I love that episode. I thought that was great.
The wives. That one was great. We did love that episode. So let's see. This one should be great too, perhaps. So we see Balky and Larry in black and white as Stan Laurel and Oliver Hardy. And the next scene, like they just start like fussing around slapstick style with like picking up tools and dropping them and whatever as they go. And a lot of this is all like meant to be silent physical comedy. There's some talking though. And we do hear a bit of dialogue here where Larry as Hardy goes, give me that before someone, I can't do the accent. We'll talk about the accents in a minute. And then Stan says, sorry, Ollie, I didn't know you were standing there. And they're kind of like tussle and they grab stuff from each other. Now, the accents. So so you and I, we didn't watch that much Laurel and Hardy as kids. It wasn't really on in
I was aware of it.
We knew about it from references and stuff like that, but we didn't like watch a lot of it.
Well, and you see Bronson right away do the thing that Stan Laurel would do, like the crying and whimpering.
So they're doing really good impersonations, what I can gather.
Good impersonation.
And I was wondering about their accents, because I think they're doing the accents that Laurel and Hardy had, but what were those? And as I was trying to figure it out just from watching this episode,
because you're like a linguist, was Stan
Laurel, was Stan Laurel? I am a bit of an armchair linguist. And as I was watching this, I was like, was Stan Laurel British? And he was, but it also, when he talks in this episode, in my ears, it sounds exactly like, she was British too. the mom in Mary Poppins, like when she talks about like the meetings for votes for women and stuff like that.
Votes for women.
Yeah.
But that whole thing takes place in England. And this England, is also, he was English.
But I also wondered if it was like that old-timey, like they call it the transatlantic accent.
Yeah, that was it.
And then that's a super interesting thing too. That's something that I think was like cultivated in American like entertainment, film, theater, and radio.
It became like the standard way to talk in the
early mid 20th century.
Yeah.
It was like a blend of American and British
That's why they all sound like that. Yeah,
and,
it's so funny.
Think like Cary Grant and like television announcers and that stuff. Old timey, yeah.
And then Oliver Hardy, American, kind of has a blue collar worker. He was from Georgia accent. And Mark Lindbaker also does the thing where he looks directly into the camera for like the react a lot. I guess they did that in their shorts, so they would just look right. Hardy would look right at the camera, like, "Can you believe this idiot?"
Yeah, and some people don't think that it's that Laurel had the transatlantic accent, that it was like just his British. But I think there's also like an assumption that the longer those two worked together, their accents sort of rubbed off on each other and became this like mixed thing. But they're distinct accents.
It is very distinct, and so when you do an impersonation, you got to nail that. And also think about Laurel and Hardy. They started
all right. He says that a lot in this.
Yeah, and they started in silent films and were actually successful when sound came in and were able to continue working, which is like wild to think. Like they made it through the talkies. Yeah, pioneers. Anyways, there's a whole bit where Laurel, Hardy, Larry, it's like, "You pour the concrete for the walkway, I'll work on the gazebo." And Balky's, but I was going to take, and they shove each other. And so there's this bit where he's doing a really good Stan Laurel Bronson is, and he's mixing concrete, puts it in a bucket. Meanwhile, Larry grabs a plank and connects this block as a walkway up to the base of the gazebo, right? So he can walk over it. He goes and he stands on it. He puts his hands on his hip. He bounces up and down. Yeah. And then he walks off and he grabs this lattice work to put up there. Meanwhile, of course,
this big, huge panel, square panel of lattice.
Balky Laurel has not seen any of this and is not paying attention. And he's having fun putting concrete in his bucket and carrying it over. And he's like, "What's this plank doing here? It's in the way." And he picks up the plank and moves it. And of course, Larry Hardy does not see him move this plank because he continues to just walk with this lattice work up the plank.
Literally walks off the plank.
And then just walks off and falls and crashes through the lattice work. Classic physical bit. Yes. Classic old-time vaudeville bit.
And then Balky
immediately starts crying. He's like, holding the plank. He's like,
and then Larry's still down there, and he's like, "Oh, I better put this plank back." So he replaces the plank. So then when
thinking he's helping, when
Larry Hardy stands up, he hits his head on the plank above him.
And he slowly gets up and then just turns and looks at him. And they're doing a great Laurel and Hardy. As Balky is like, and he's like, "Why did you do that?" Balky
like bumbles through these. "Oh, you told me to take the concrete
Stan and
Oliver.
We gotta,
Stan, we'll say all the names every time.
Stan goes, "What? Why did I do what?" First he says, which is kind of funny.
Yeah. He says, "Why did you remove the board so I would fall on my face?" And he starts to bumble through an answer, and then he like breaks down crying.
I didn't know you were gonna. Ollie, I didn't.
And then Ollie just like is like, "Never mind." Larry says, "Never mind. Just be more careful." Something like that. And then here's what Balky says a lot in Laurel's accent through this episode. He goes, "Well, all right. Well, all right." And then a very aggravated Larry turns away from Balky to stomp away. And of course, what steps on the bottom part of a garden hoe, of a whatever.
The garden rake, and it flips up and it hits him in the face.
Yes. The stick hits him in the face very much like
Sideshow Bob on The Simpsons, but this is a recurring bit that you will see.
Well, Sideshow Bob probably took it from Laurel and Hardy.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I don't know if they did that in the original. It's an homage to that.
So, like, smacks him in the face. The pole of the stick of the rake
Has anyone ever actually done that? I guess that happens. But I mean, how would you'd stop?
No,
before
you know what happened to our cousin though is what would actually happen is that rake would just go through your foot, and that's what happened to her, and it was rusty, and it was a big
you need tetanus shots and stuff. Yeah. You got to be wearing some good shoes for that to happen.
Yeah.
Sideshow Bob had really big feet, so I'll give it to him.
So, okay, then we get like this.
Circle wipe.
Old-timey
circle wipe.
Old-timey circle wipe.
It like circles
iris
into
wipe.
black.
Yeah, but it's a circle more than the iris. And then I guess we're like a little bit in the future, a little bit later. And they're still working. They're like working with the lattice panels and the concrete mixes and the planks.
And then they do this bit again. The exact same thing, except this time the tub of concrete is underneath where that second plank is.
Yeah.
And for some reason, Stan removes the plank as Larry, again, is carrying Gladys. And again, walks off, falls into it, it breaks. But this time, it's in a tub of
It's like literally
wet concrete.
just after they did it already.
They did it again. I was like, okay.
They didn't even wait that much. I mean, they did like the rake handle thing, but then...
Yeah.
But before they did that again, there's this funny moment where Balky as Hardy is like straddles on one of these plank boards, and then he has the shovel, and then he starts pretending he's rowing a canoe.
Yes, like it's an oar over the concrete.
Anyway, that was funny. It was cute. Okay, so they repeated that gag.
So this time when Larry gets up, he's
got concrete all over the front of his overalls.
And then all this is silent as Stan looks over. At first, he starts with his finger wiping off the concrete and then like just flicking it.
Larry,
wiping it off his overalls, flicking it down, wiping it and flicking it. And then he pulls out his tie and he wipes it and gets it all dirty. And Oliver's like, get out of here. And so then Stan walks over, picks up a garden hose, walks back over. It's got a spray nozzle. And just proceeds to start hosing down Oliver.
And to his credit, the concrete's coming right off.
Look, he's
getting him very clean. But
of course, Ollie is very annoyed that he's now getting wet.
Standing there just looking angry, but he doesn't move out of the way or anything.
But he's cleaning all
the concrete's just coming down. So he gets most of it off. And then he like lifts Larry Hardy's arm and like sprays in his armpit. And then he does the other side. He cleans his hat, and Larry's just standing there looking annoyed.
Well, Stan is happily just spraying him down.
This part was kind of funny, yeah.
And then he's finally like pushes him as if to say, "Go, you stop doing that." Grabs the hose and throws it away.
And then he goes for payback, and he takes this like small piece of wood and like props open the front of Balky's overalls.
Yes, and sticks this like wood so it stays open.
So it tents it open, and then he takes the bucket and gets some cement in it, and then he pours the wet cement down that opening in front of his overalls very slowly. And Balky as Hardy would just stand there and take it for the gag, right?
And then he pauses, and then they both look down Balky's overalls. They both look into the bucket. Oh, there's more. And he continues again, pouring more
And then
concrete.
He pulls out the stick and like pats in the cement, pats his chest.
And now Balky has a load of concrete in his shorts. So I guess they're even.
And then he sprays him with the water nozzle again. And then Larry starts chasing him, this and that, and they're like slipping and falling on the wet concrete on the ground.
No, there's some funny bits where Larry like turns around and bends over and puts the bucket down, and then Balky just sprays his butt with the hose for some reason, clean up the rest of it.
Yeah.
He turns around, looks at him, and then finally gets fed up.
They run around,
grabs the hose,
slipping and sliding, and
starts they're chasing each other.
And we fade to black. That's the end of Act 1.
Oh boy, lots of Laurel and Hardy silliness coming
But what
up.
has happened in the story?
Nothing. Absolutely nothing.
They're just trying to build a gazebo.
The same bit twice in a row.
The same act, yeah.
That confused me. Anyways, listener, did it confuse you? Let us know. You can join this conversation. Join our Facebook group. There's a link in the description. I post threads of the episodes we're going to record ahead of time. So you can leave your comments and you can go back and you can meet other people who listen to this show and who love Perfect Strangers like we do.
Well, maybe the gag is going to come back a third time and it'll be a nice rule of threes kind of thing.
I wouldn't hold my breath.
That would make more sense.
But it was just confusing. They did it twice. Yeah. Anyways, cut back to
Act 2.
Act 2, back in color, back into the kitchen. What are the girls up to?
Back in the real world.
Back in the real world.
Reality.
We got to get them to introduce us back into the fake reality.
So they're in the kitchen watching all this, and we find out that they have to work a flight later today. And Marianne says, do you think it's safe to leave them here alone? And Jennifer says, the question is it safe for us to stay here with them?
Oh, boy.
They're out of the way. Anyway, so they turn their gaze back out the window, directing our gaze back out the window. And we see Balky and Larry next to the gazebo.
In color, the gazebo is a little bit built now. They've got some progress.
It's almost finished.
And then it does that weird wavy dissolve again into a color version of the cousins.
Like a matted color.
Laurel and Hardy. And then it cuts to another angle and it's just black and white. Very jarring.
Strange.
Very jarring.
And so we're back as Laurel and Hardy, and they're like...
Ollie's like, it's coming along quite nicely.
It certainly is.
Certainly is, Ollie.
He says, you pour the concrete for the path. I can't do his accent. Anyways, and I'll go do other stuff. And Stan's like, okay.
There's a whole shovel part here.
Shovel part.
Where Stan is... digging in the concrete with the wrong end of the shovel, and he thinks he lost the end of the shovel, even though he just has it backwards. And then he puts his hands in the concrete looking for the shovel and pulls out a white high heel shoe. It's very strange. How did that shoe get in there?
Yeah, where did he find that?
And then you hear him go, oh, miss. Oh, miss. Like there's a woman buried in the concrete.
Oh, my goodness. Dark.
And he starts crying because he's like, I'm never going to find the head of this shovel. And he stands up and looks over, and it's on the shovel. And he's like, oh, it's right there. Because he just had the shovel upside down. So there's a bunch of these reverse jokes coming up.
Okay.
With Stan here. Then there's another bit where Stan is trying to pour the concrete on, and Oliver has a hose, and he bumps into him, and Stan spills the concrete onto the grass.
Now look what you've done.
Yes, he always say, so I was waiting for the other classic line. Oliver Hardy would always be like, look what you've done. But I thought his catchphrase was like, this is another fine mess you've gotten us into. I believe that was like what he said all the time. They don't say it in this episode. So he's like, clean up this mess. And then
he goes, how could you be so clumsy? He goes,
oh, this
Oliver
is funny.
Asks Hardy, how could you be so... No, Oliver is Hardy. Hardy asks Laurel, how could you be so clumsy? And then Balky goes, well, I went to school to study for it.
Well, I went to school to study for it. Went to school to study for it, Oliver says.
And he says, I was first in my class. I got a little Irish there. And then he asks him, well, how did you learn to be so clumsy?
And he's like, well, I certainly didn't have to go to school for it.
And he says, well, you bumped into me.
And Oliver's like, I didn't bump into you. You were standing where I was walking.
Yes, but I was trying to.
You were standing where I was walking. And then he's just like, yes, but...
He just gives up. I'm sorry.
Don't let it happen again, he says. Now clean up this mess. And Stan is still like, but I was going to... And then you get another bit where he's like, it's great
this
physical.
Was kind of funny, yeah.
Yeah, where he's scooping up concrete off of grass,
and he puts the bucket down
to his right, and he hooks the end of it with the end of the shovel, so that when he scoops up the concrete lifts up and turns around, the bucket is gone.
Behind him because it's on
the shovel has a completely different weight balance in your hand right now.
Yes.
He does not notice that at all. That this shovel is resisting and wants to tip
does
up.
A little spin around like a dog chasing its tail looking for this bucket. He doesn't see it because it's always behind him. And then Hardy comes back and he's like, I thought I told you to clean this up. He's like, I was trying to, but I lost my bucket. Someone must have stolen my bucket.
Crying. He's like, someone must have stolen my bucket.
It was my favorite bucket. My bucket is lost. And then Stan just gives him are you kidding me look, and he grabs the bucket off the back. He's like, here's your bucket. And then he's like, but I don't think that's my bucket.
My bucket was
a bit larger.
It didn't have this curve.
And then
he shoves it into him. He's like, there you go, bucket.
Just get to work. And then in a huff, Hardy says, just get to work, turns around in the opposite direction. And what do we have? Another repeat gag. Steps on the rake again with the handle flying into his face. Boing. Again.
Yeah. Second time.
At least they spaced that one out a little. The other two are like
right. Threes.
Yeah. Let's hope for a third.
So then we end that bit. We get another circle wipe and come back. And now Oliver has a different job for Stan, as he tells him he has to get the blueprints. And he says, you take the measurements for the steps.
Yeah. At this point, the gazebo is like all built except for the steps leading up to the platform and like the walkway part.
There's a walkway with like some barriers. I don't know if they've poured the concrete already. And then again, Stan goes, but I want to go. And he's like, just do it.
You take the measurements for the steps. And so he takes the pencil and pad, and
then we get a whole bit that answers the question: what if Oliver, Laurel, and Hardy had a modern day tape measure? How would they react? So it's a whole bit, and a tape measure is
tape
fun.
Measures in the 20s?
I don't know if they had like the crazy
30s?
like these retractable ones. They probably just had like yardsticks or actual like tape.
Yeah.
But he's got one of the tape measures where you let go and it pulls back. He doesn't know about the button. So you have a little bit of fun of him laying it out, trying to measure and letting go, and the thing flies off. He does it 3 times. And he's about to, if you notice, he's about to nail down the tape measure at one point because it won't stay there.
Yeah.
Just as Oliver walks over Larry, and then Balky pulls back,
swings the mallet up,
hits him right in the face,
hits him in the face. Yeah. Larry grabs the mallet from him, takes his hat off, and hits him on the head with the mallet. Retribution.
Some old school Stooges. Like these guys must have been the inspiration for the Stooges if there's this much physical violence in the original. Laurel and Hardy. And then this part is hilarious because Larry turns and bends over to the gazebo to measure it. And Balky just winds up and kicks him in the butt.
It's the wind up. That's
a whole
so
wind up,
a
like
whole
just out of
leg
nowhere.
Wind up and kicks him in the butt.
Because he's not even trying to pretend like it was an accident or he's trying to do something else. He was intentionally.
I love a good wind up.
Just a wind up and a kick in the butt.
Classic wind up, always hilarious.
And then Larry shoves Balky. Balky shoves Ollie, Larry back onto the gazebo.
Yeah,
he like turtles on his back for a while.
And then they compose themselves, and Larry Hardy goes back to face the gazebo and bend over looking at these blueprints. And then
and he's measuring the space with his hand, right? To show.
Because Balky Laurel has the tape measure. So while he's doing that measurement with his hand, he's sort of bent over the blueprints. Balky's behind him, and he takes the tape measure and like measures his butt, like his waist side to side. And again, they've made him like rounder and bigger.
Yeah.
And then he like giggles at how big his butt is.
They have a little bit of extra chin and extra face.
I think Larry definitely had extra chin, like not extra chin, but like a double chin, and
like a fat suit kind of thing.
I think had like a fake nose on.
But his neck is also kind of filled out.
And Balky had some neck too. That
they have drawn in his eyebrows, but
just to make him
look like them.
Look like the parts. Yeah. And Larry's got a little drawn in like Hitler mustache kind of thing that Hardy had.
Yes, he does.
And they matted his front curls down to make it look like Hardy's haircut.
That was the style at the time. Was the Hitler stash?
It wasn't. I'm sure it had another name before Hitler appropriated it for his.
So anyways, they do that whole bit, and then Ollie grabs Stan and just like throws him onto the gazebo.
Yeah.
Quite rude, but he gets, again, another retribution as he turns and steps on the garden rake for a third time.
A third time.
Smacks him in the face, of course.
So that makes me think that they might have had that other gag 3 times too.
That other gag is too long to do it 3 times. Like the garden rake, it makes sense to do 3 times.
I wonder if they had tried to do it. And the garden rake is spaced out.
It's spaced out perfect.
But I wonder if they maybe actually tried to do that other gag 3 times in a row together, and it just got too boring, or they ran out. They needed to cut for time, so they left 2 in. I would have decided to just leave one in if that was the case.
Yeah, because then you're like, why'd you just do this twice?
Yeah.
With nothing in the middle.
2 is weird. Yeah.
Anyways, we get our final circle wipe. And as the scene comes back, you see a fully complete gazebo. We're still in black and white. And the thing is constructed. It's standing. There's a concrete walkway. And Larry's like, everything came out just like we planned.
And Balky Laurel goes, well, it certainly did. He says, maybe we should consider opening a gazebo building business.
And then Larry just snarkily goes, a gazebo building business. That's an excellent idea, he says.
And then he goes, thank you. And then he's like, now let's put up our sign. And they hold up this
they got a sign. It says, welcome.
It's like a wood plank cut out, like what you see outside of a cabin or something. Yeah.
It's a welcome sign that they're going to put
welcome,
on.
And they're going to put it up somewhere. And Larry's got the sign, and he picks up like a hammer and nail, but Balky's like, I was thinking that we should glue the sign on. And Hardy goes, no, we'll hammer it in. That way it'll stay up. And then, of course, he tries to object. Yeah, but I was thinking that,
so you were thinking, were you? He interrupts him because, and then this is kind of great.
Crossover between the two
Finally,
characters.
A crossover.
Hardy turns into a bit of Larry, but in his Hardy voice goes, tell me, how many gazebos have you built? How many?
Well,
how many gazebos? How many gazebos have you built?
Well, counting this one, one.
Then we'll do it my way.
Well, you never told me how many gazebos you built, Ollie.
Yeah, true.
But I do love that they did the Larry.
Yeah.
How many times? How many times have you?
I wonder if they actually took that from Laurel and Hardy. Do you think? I don't know.
I don't know. Maybe I think that was one of their little additions to comedy.
So it's a nice fusion there.
Yeah.
And so,
now you kind of know what's going to happen.
Yeah, they're going. So the gazebo's in front of them. Larry's about to hammer it in as Hardy, and Laurel standing behind him on the opposite the gazebo. And he hammers it in 3 times. Hit. And then he looks back to Laurel, like all proud of himself, smiling. And then he turns back to the sign. He gives it one last good hit in the nail to put it in. And then every other part of the gazebo, except for the pole that he's just hammered that sign in, like collapses.
The whole thing collapses on cue. It's a great gag.
Just one plank staying up with the welcome sign on it.
And they're just standing there staring at it.
Yeah, they're like, oh.
As they're like, okay. And then Stan from behind Ollie reaches up with 2 hands
to straighten the sign.
And there's a wiggle on the sign. And goes back and he goes, well, that's better.
That's better. And then we kind of...
and then the last thing is presumed violence. Is the last thing we see is like Ollie standing there with the hammer.
Yeah.
He looks at the hammer and he looks right into the camera.
Oh my gosh.
As if, should I just bash his head in?
Menacing.
What do you think, viewer?
And then we like squiggle dissolve back to real world, present day, whatever we're calling that, color.
But it's not. This time it dissolves back and it's in black and white, but it's modern day.
Oh, it's black and white.
And then when they do the cut to the 2-shot, it's in color.
Yeah.
It does the reverse of that.
There was something weird with the editing.
They couldn't do both of those things at once.
No, that's your theory. My theory is they did do it properly, but when they had to cut scenes for time, things got awkward or something. I don't know.
It was either dissolve, then switch color, or switch color. That they couldn't do both at once.
I don't know what was going on there.
So when it does cut back, we see the cousins sitting on this bench that's next to the walkway.
Yeah.
And all their equipment is in front of them.
Yeah, like toolbox, a bucket.
Yeah. And but the gazebo's built.
Gazebo's built. The walkway's there.
And the first thing I thought of was, wait, aren't they renting? Did you get permission from the landlord to pour concrete pathway and build a structure?
For sure.
You don't own this place.
That's
something the owner should be doing.
Maybe they got permission.
I mean, that's a lot of construction and a lot of risk to let your tenants. Oh, yeah, sure, pour your own concrete.
We just have to believe that they got permission.
That you guys were renting. What's going on here?
Or are they going to ask forgiveness afterward?
Yeah, I just imagine the owner would be like, what did you do to my backyard?
They were so confident that they were going to do such a good job that it would actually raise the value of the property.
They thought, hey, now
they thought they were doing the landlord a favor.
No, the landlord's going to be like, great, I can charge you more now next month.
Yeah.
I don't know. It just seemed weird. I thought you were renters. Renters don't do that. Anyways.
All right, but what are we dealing with? They're sitting there and we're back in color finally. And Larry says, I'm exhausted, but the gazebo looks pretty darn good. And Balky agrees. And then Marianne and Jennifer come outside in their work uniforms.
Their flight attendant uniforms. They're on their way to work.
Wait. Earlier they said we have a flight later tonight. So we're to believe that all this happened in one day. They put up this gazebo with all the shenanigans.
Yeah, that was earlier in the morning in the very beginning. And now, it's still kind of daylight out, but it's getting darker. It seems like the sun's setting.
So they're all dressed up, about to go to work. They're in their uniforms. And they're very impressed. They're like, it looks great. Jennifer says it's beautiful. And Jennifer's like, so impressed. She goes, it's been standing for several hours now. Wait, and several hours that it's been standing? Okay. Anyway, I don't understand how time works on this day.
Larry's like, yes, it has. And it's going to be around for a long time because it was built by two men who knew what they were doing. And Balky goes, cause it. I thought we built it. Pretty good.
Zing.
And they remark the new concrete walkway is nice, looks professional.
They have to make sure they say the word concrete there.
Yes, that is an important detail. There's a concrete walkway that somehow they let the renter.
It looks so professional.
Yes.
And then Jennifer admits to Larry, I have to admit, I didn't think you could do it. And Larry's like, why would you think that? And she goes, I don't know, past performance, I guess.
Fair enough.
Ouch. And Larry's like, well, we did it. And then the girls are like, we have to go to work. They kiss their respective partners and they're off. And they're like, great job with the gazebo. Bye.
There's a funny bit, like when they go behind the bench to kiss them. Did you notice, like Marianne and Balky, they miss each other. She goes to one side and he goes over there. Funny. And he turns and she goes to the other side. And then she grabs his head and pulls it back and kisses him.
They must have had so much fun.
They're so cute. Meanwhile, Jennifer and Larry just do boring kisses.
Yeah.
These two always have a fun relationship.
Oh, yeah.
So, yes, the girls go, we're going to be late. We got to go. They run off.
And they leave, exit the scene. And then the guys are feeling pretty good. They're like, oh, they seemed so impressed. Look, our ladies are so impressed. And then then we have a hint of the upcoming joke. Balky says, lucky thing for us, they didn't ask us to help them with their suitcases.
Okay. And he's like, yes, very lucky.
And then
Larry's like, well, let's see. They said they were taking the Hong Kong flight. So that means they'll be back in
together.
4 days?
They're like 4 days. 4 days.
4 days.
And then
the reveal.
And then they as they move all the tool box and the bucket from in front of them, we hear Balky say, 4 days ought to be enough time to break out of this concrete. And we see that they're sitting, but both of their legs from below the knee are like firmly encased in
shin
dry
down, they're
concrete.
in the concrete on the step, and they're stuck. And so that's
Larry's like, it's amazing how fast concrete dries. And Balky says, well, it did say quick drying cement, but who knew?
Well, who knew? And they both stand up, and Larry's like, there's like all the tools are way in front of them. He's like, can you reach that sledgehammer? And Balky's like, oh, I don't know. Let me try. And then he bends forward like he's in the Michael Jackson Smooth Criminal. I want to know how they did that.
Yeah, but it's so much higher.
That's really flexible.
It would break your leg.
Yeah, that's really flexible concrete there.
The way they
set
bent.
There.
Yeah, I don't know.
So then Larry has to pull it back. He can't reach it. He goes, okay, let me try.
And then we hear that Laurel and Hardy old-timey music.
And they're both swinging back and forth, and they cannot reach the sledgehammer and roll credits, except... For the second time only on the show, during the credits, there is some extra video.
Ooh, additional footage.
Digital footage. We cut back to black and white. Back to them
as Laurel and Hardy.
They're sitting on the floor in front of the concrete bucket, playing with their hats.
This made me chuckle, actually. Yeah.
Oh, it did?
Yeah. They're both sitting on the ground, kind of like with kids with their legs in front of them, and they both have their hats in their hand. And Larry goes to put his hat on in a big gesture.
Yeah.
And Balky, as Laurel, takes his hat, and before Hardy can get his own hat on, he slips it under on his head. So then Hardy puts his hat on top of that hat.
Now 2 hats.
And he's sitting with 2 hats. It made me laugh. Yeah.
And Stan's laughing.
Yeah,
he's doing his
so
Stan
funny.
bit, and then he takes his hat off and he sees he has 2 hats. And then he just gives the hat back to Stan. And they both put it on. They both look at each other and do the nod.
Yes.
And then just sit there.
And you said that was the second time that we've had footage in the credits.
The first time was great. Remember, it was when Grandpa came to visit and they were in the Greek restaurant.
That's
the Greek
right.
dance
The
continued.
dancing,
They had a whole dance and then it worked into kind of like a dance of joy at the end. That was great.
That was good. This one was cute.
This one's okay. Roll credits. Listener, before we give you our thoughts, make sure you check out our TeePublic shop where you can get some Dance of Joy swag. Visit danceofjoypod.com/shop, and there's t-shirts and hoodies, cell phone cases, coffee mugs, all with the logo.
Tote bags.
One of these days, I will be making more fun t-shirts from the show. I have so many ideas. I've just never got around to doing it.
Well, we're running out of time.
There's
Our
a lot.
show's going to close out.
We'll close. Well, once we're done doing the show, then I'll have time to make these t-shirts
okay,
also.
Gotcha.
So stick
Our
around.
next
Stay tuned.
venture as brother and sister will be a thriving Perfect Strangers
Super
t-shirt
niche
business.
Perfect Strangers
Super
t-shirts
niche
on TeePublic. Anyways, in the meantime, what'd you think? We got a tribute to classic comedy duo.
Yes.
And did you like it? It was okay.
It was.
I like the Honeymooners one.
Honeymooners was much better
because there was
think.
actual plot and like stuff happening that impacted the story.
Even within the spoof, there was a story. There was things that they wanted. Yeah, and there were roles for the girls, and they weren't so like forced in as like narrative tools for us.
In this one, what happens? The plot is
they build a
gazebo. And they do it by repeating a gag twice in a row.
There's no like tension. The whole reason for this episode was just for them to play Laurel and Hardy, which was enjoyable for what it was, but not super enjoyable because like I'm sure Laurel and Hardy had so many more gags that they could have just replaced one of the repeated ones with another gag.
Yeah. You just pick another Laurel and Hardy gag.
Yeah.
But I think the impersonations were very good. I did enjoy
the
that.
Accents were
the accents were great.
The costumes were great.
I guess Bronson did such a good job in press. There was a show called The All New Adventures of Laurel and Hardy.
Oh.
In For Love of Mummy. It was supposed to be a new version of Laurel and Hardy. It was a movie. It was not successful. He got cast as Stan Laurel's nephew. But I've never heard of that, and I don't think...
I have a feeling Bronson Pinchot did a lot of things that didn't take off.
I think so.
Before and after Perfect Strangers, but anyway. Maybe we'll review that one. Maybe we'll watch that one if we can find it somewhere.
So, yeah, a lot of physical comedy, but it was just like the pacing is really slow because it's like an old-timey thing.
I said to you after, we just watched it together, and I said to you after, why did that 22 minutes feel like an hour? It felt so long because it just wasn't moving. It was, I guess it was like a little boring.
So their movements were intentionally slow and like mimicking the old-timey
but it just felt so long.
Bits, but it did. It just dragged a little. They could have picked it up. They could have put another bit in.
Yeah.
But they already did the Honeymooners.
It was just okay. It was not as good as Honeymooners. It had I did chuckle at some points. And they did good impersonations and good accents. All right. What did our listeners think? First up, we have listener cousin Pam Hitchcock, who just straight up didn't like the episode. She said, I felt it was lackluster and boring. But she says, she explains like she's an outlier. She doesn't like Laurel and Hardy. And I think the creators of this episode, like the whole team, was assuming that Laurel and Hardy is beloved. Everyone loves them and everyone's going to enjoy this. Anyway, she says, unlike most people, I don't like Laurel and Hardy. It's not because of this. I've watched several pieces of their work and they just don't appeal to me. I know it's blasphemy. She did love the piano movers, but that was because of the Perfect Strangers chemistry. Cousin Pam, I don't know if you've watched the Laurel and Hardy original that was based on, because we enjoyed that.
Yeah, that was good.
she says, the boys certainly have the comedy chops to pull a reenactment off, but this just fell flat. Agreed. And when someone, parentheses, Jennifer and Marianne, has to point out a joke to you, there's a problem. I think this is in reference to just like them feeding us.
You know who they remind me of?
Who?
Tom and Jerry. No, that's what she says.
Oh, yeah. You know, they remind me of.
Get to, in case you didn't know, Laurel and Hardy.
But they also squeezed in Laverne and Shirley. But no, like, real joke about it, just a reference. Yeah, you know who these guys remind me of? The Odd Couple. I'm surprised they didn't do an Odd Couple spoof. All right, next up we have listener cousin Nicole Stoner, who writes a dumb... this is Nicole who told us about the sweatshirt colors at the beginning. A dumb observation to make on my end. It's not dumb, Nicole. But it's interesting to see Larry wearing red and Balky wearing blue when they're together for once. It's usually been that in general, Larry mostly wore blue and teal while Balky had more red in his wardrobe. Very astute observation. Thank you for pointing that out. Next up, we have listener cousin Jason Korinko.
Cousin Jason.
Oh boy, writes, this was painful. Cousin Jason loves Laurel and Hardy and agrees that Balky and Larry were inspired by them and then references, of course, we've seen the Piano Movers episode that was based on the Laurel and Hardy bit short. And
that was called the Music Box, the Laurel and Hardy bit.
Yeah. And we've seen Larry and Balky do the gag with the plank of wood at least 3 times. This was just so uninspired. There's basically one joke the whole episode, and the girls are there to point out explicitly that they are like Laurel and Hardy. No one seems to be having fun here, and as competent as Mark and Bronson were at their impersonations, they just seemed checked out.
Yeah, a little bit.
This is in contrast to the episode in which they took on the Honeymooners, which I enjoyed because they seemed to be enjoying themselves. Yes.
Yeah, that one was great.
Another element that weakened this one was the laugh track. It seemed out of place, and I suspect it was either canned laughter or from a disingenuous live audience who had to be cued when to laugh because nothing was funny here.
Laugh, damn it.
I hope nobody saw this and decided the real Laurel and Hardy were not worth checking out. What a disservice to everyone.
He's got some fair points, and I think the parts where, I mean, there must have been different times where they shot the Laurel and Hardy, and maybe they didn't even have a live audience for those, and they just kind of put in the canned laughter.
But you know what I just thought of regarding the comparison to when they did the Honeymooners? I think the Honeymooners characters are more conducive to having that amount of fun while playing them out.
Yeah.
Because the characters themselves were high energy and were more like, and Laurel and Hardy had like the physical comedy, but their energies were like quieter.
Right.
And
no, you're right.
You know what I'm saying?
It evolves,
it was a different
but you
vibe.
don't get Fred and Ralph, or Ralph and Ed if you don't have Stan and Oliver.
Right.
Like these guys were the predecessors to Abbott and Costello.
This impression that he's talking about that they weren't having as much fun, they might have, but it's not as conducive to having that amount of fun as the Honeymooners.
Well, because Jackie Gleason was just like a bigger character.
Big, boisterous.
Ed Norton does similar things with his hands that Stan Laurel does.
And these two were just like quieter.
Yeah. There's a lot of parallel, but they, I mean, throughout the show, they brilliantly,
skinny fat. Yeah.
All their bits though are brilliant, like kind of inspired by all these people.
Of course,
you've seen.
But I just think like maybe it was harder to like make it look like they were having
in 1991, like this is like a 40-year-old reference. In 1991, it's a 40-year-old reference, right?
Now,
so it's even older now, and I don't even know how relevant Laurel and Hardy are to people, but they are. They should be watched. You can find it on YouTube.
I'll tell you what's not relevant because I do comedy, right? And I used to do this bit where I would just reference Laverne and Shirley.
Yeah.
And like a lot of audiences now are too
they don't even
young.
know Laverne and Shirley.
You really have to see who's in the crowd first. And then but I wanted to do the rest of the bit. Like the bit was decent, but I was looking for a reference to that. It was about when I moved home and was living with our mom. And I wanted to say we were a regular Laverne and Shirley in the house together. But someone was like, well, why don't you just update the reference to like a more modern pair of women roommates?
Who is that?
Couple comedy, like a buddy comedy. And I was like, there isn't. I don't know what the references are. To me, it was Laverne and Shirley. And so anyway, I just stopped doing it.
You could do Golden Girls. Everybody knows Golden Girls.
Yeah, but But there was 4 of them.
Yeah.
And we were 2. Yeah. That's a different implication. Golden Girls would imply that we're 2 old ladies.
Yeah.
Where I was trying to do for the thing that I was going to go on with was that we were like shenanigans in the house.
Yeah.
As lady
and
roommates
stuff.
and buddy comedy type.
There's nothing like that.
No, but I couldn't keep doing it because half the time no one would get the Laurel and Laverne and Shirley reference.
Nobody gets my references anymore. Anyway. I'm too old.
Yeah, we're old. All right. We have one more listener comment. Listener cousin Whitney Smith writes, "This may be my possible short thoughts on this episode, just like the Honeymooners episode. Once again, horrible." Horrible. She actually wrote horrible episode of classic Hollywood. Very boring and yawn. I don't know if it's me, but I'm not a fan of Laurel and Hardy. Okay, 2 people don't like Laurel and Hardy and their comedy, so I don't know the concept of their comedy. So I don't know if Mark and Bronson did their characters justice, but from what I have been reading, doesn't sound like they did. Oh, interesting. I'm the same with Abbott and Costello. Oh, there's also Abbott and Costello. Yeah. Were they before or after?
No, they were after. All this started with Laurel and Hardy. Then you get the 3 Stooges, Abbott and Costello.
She says, I'm the same with Abbott and Costello. I didn't think they were funny either. I'm more of a 3 Stooges fan. Even when it was a lot of physical comedy, just didn't cut it for me. I think the cousins have simply lost their niche. Maybe the only funny part was Larry's how many times bit, and maybe when Larry said it was built by 2 men who knew what they were doing. And finally, she concludes, well, it was enjoyable, even though the episodes weren't the best. So, yeah, another just meh. So listeners didn't really like this.
All right, we made it through. Don't be ridiculous, not said.
Nope.
Of course I have. Don't be ridiculous.
Kind of a missed opportunity to to do another fusion there, to have him say it as Hardy.
Oh, yes.
Or as Laurel.
Don't be ridiculous.
In the British, in the British accent. Yeah.
and no
Dimitri.
Well, they were barely in the house. Yeah. They were just in the kitchen, and they were in black and white, old-timey world.
Okay, and I think we have our answer. Now we're at Perfect Strangers today. Can we remake this episode today? I don't think so, because people won't know Laurel and Hardy. I mean, you could do it.
Well, the equivalent would be you would do it based off a show in the 80s today, like 40 years earlier. So what would that be? I don't know.
It would be Perfect Strangers.
It would be No, if you did Perfect Strangers now, you'd have to do another sitcom. For like different strokes. I don't know.
No. Buddy count, or maybe the Odd Couple.
Or you do Abbott and Costello or 3 Stooges.
I don't. Yeah, I get. Obviously, you could do it today. There are still gazebos, and you still have to build them, and you'd still have concrete disasters and.
Maybe you could do it like it's planks. In Minecraft or something, and you got to build stuff. No.
I think you could do it. It's just a matter of will people know the Laurel and Hardy reference.
Yeah, the longer.
But you could just write more lines in for the girls to explain that.
You could.
It's like this show that used to be on in the 20s,
I used to see this show in the 40s and 50s
reruns. Laurel and Hardy.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you could make it today. Why would you?
Sure. I think you just don't do it, because what did they do? They built a gazebo.
To be fair, they shouldn't have made this episode back then. Yeah.
All right. So we have our answer. That's it for this week, listener. Next week, what's happening? Oh, it's the start of the 2-parter
of this season.
For this season.
As y'all know, there's a 2-parter in every season. This one's coming early in the season. They've all kind of been early in the seasons. Yeah.
I know. Let's see how crazy they get, because each one has been crazier and crazier.
Yeah.
Last season, they were in California. They were shooting on location. They were getting shot at.
Yeah.
They were driving and getting shot at. It was wild.
Yes.
There was a murder. There was a stabbing. It was great.
What's going to happen? We'll find out next week.
In the meantime, there's another way you can support the show, and that's with actual Dig does, or whatever currency is these days. Bitcoin, I don't know, rubles. Visit our website, danceandjoypod.com/support. Buy us a virtual coffee. It's a virtual tip jar. All your support goes back into the show. And that's it.
And if you are virtually completely broke, that's okay too. You can support us by going to our website, danceofjoypod.com. Come and click around on everything that's clickable. What's clickable on the site? Well, you can click on all the places where you can stream this podcast and like this podcast and rate it and review it. All of those clicks helps us out. So just take a few minutes and go click around. Pull everything up, press like on everything, subscribe, leave us a review. You don't even have to lie. Leave us an honest review. We're here for it. You can also just say hi. You can press a button right on the main page of our website and leave us a voice message. Tell us if you built your own gazebo and how that went. Tell us anything you like. Tell us if you watch Laurel and Hardy. We'd love to hear from you. You can also send this all to us in writing at our email address, danceofjoypod@gmail.com. We're here for all of it. Also, you can click to all of our social media sites, and please do that and follow us on those. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Every follow, every click helps us out. But Imran, what is the most important thing our listeners should do?
Start using the pronunciation gazebo more often.
Gazebo
let's
is the correct pronunciation.
We can change the world. We can fix an error.
You know who had a good gazebo? Stars Hollow, Connecticut, and Gilmore Girls. That was a good town gazebo.
That's an iconic gazebo.
Right
Lights on it, right in the middle. Lots of drama happened there.
I like a good gazebo. Every time I see a gazebo, I want to go sit in
I want to go in the gazebo. But what do? You just go in there and you sit
you read a book.
You're like, I'm in the gazebo. This is great. And then you're like, okay, I'm going to leave the gazebo.
And you stare longingly out to the small town.
And you just, because you feel kind of halfway enclosed, you feel safe. I don't know what it is about a gazebo. They're magical.
It's romantic. It's cute.
No, the real important thing is to share this show, listeners, spread it around. Listen to it in their gazebo.
Yeah, talk about us, talk about Perfect Strangers. Word of mouth goes a long way in this world, and it's really simple and it's free. Thank you so much for listening and being with us till now. That's our show for today. Now we are so happy.
We do the dance of joy.
Hey, hey.